I've made it my mission to go back and replay all of the Sherlock Holmes games. And when I say replay all of them, I don't mean the, point and click adventures. Like, I will get to those. But I'm talking, I went down a rabbit hole. Let's just say that. I went down a rabbit hole when I saw Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 on sale. And then I started Googling things like, which order do you play them in? And all of that good stuff, because I tell you what, there is some lore behind these games. So, this is about the Testament of Sherlock Holmes, because this is a really great starting point for modern Sherlock Holmes, and it's kind of a necessary evil. Let me explain and let me dive in. This is going to be a review of the Testament of Sherlock Holmes, but also a kind of explanation from a modern gamer's take, because this game came out in 2012, which to me doesn't seem very long ago, but then when you do the counting, it's a teenager. It's a teenager now, and actually was supposed to come out in 2010, and it very much feels that way, but it was delayed. So the Testament of Sherlock Holmes, you can see, it is the kind of linchpin Sherlock Holmes game where Frogwares went from old school Sherlock Holmes, where it's like pixel hunting, point and clicky type, lots of investigation, puzzles sort of thing, to the modern, to, more of a deduction based system. And right in the middle of those two kind of gameplay styles is the Testament of Sherlock Holmes, which I never played at the time. But now I've gone back to satiate some kind of ADHD autism trait inside me. It's just whatever. So the Testament of Sherlock Holmes is kind of one case. It's basically one case that runs a kind of storyline that, deals with the big bad villains of Victorian London. It doesn't have individual cases like the kind of later Sherlock Holmes games do have. I am playing on PS5 Pro. So I'm playing the PS4 version of the game. I'll do a quick information here, because it's very confusing. So they actually re-released the Testament of Sherlock Holmes on Switch, PS4, probably Xbox One, but they released it like a couple years ago when the PS4 was already defunct for, many, like, it's been defunct like 5 years, right, since the PS5 came out. So I'm not sure why they did that. I guess because they just made it and it was good enough to run on the PS4. Now, it seems to be a remaster. It's not kind of put forward as a remaster, but it runs at 60 frames per second. It looks nice. I don't think it's 4K. It might be 1440p, but you can see some jaggedy edges. But the point being, I'm playing on PS5 Pro, and the point being, this looks really good for a game that's that old. And I think it might not be remastered, but they've definitely gone in, tweaked the kind of PC version settings up to modern standards, and then implemented that into the game you'll buy. So I guess the question I'm trying to answer here is, if you have been looking at the Testament of Sherlock Holmes on PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and being like, isn't this game super old? Like, isn't it going to look bad? Not really. Like, it looks dated, but it has definitely a modern resolution and a good frame rate. So don't be worried about that. Now, the game largely plays out like a puzzle game. So a lot of the investigations that you'll do, and it's all kind of, think of it as one elongated case. So from some of the other Sherlock Holmes games where they, as they're small self-contained kind of stories and stuff, this is more of like one long one. And what you'll do is you'll go to these different locations if you've played Crimes and Punishment, which I will be talking about in the future. So, subscribe and let me know in the comments. I'm going to go through every Sherlock Holmes game from Testament forward, and then maybe Testament backward. Who knows? Woo, let's get wild. You go to a location on the minimap. They'll be talking to characters. There's not really dialogue choices. There is, but they don't really impact anything. They just give you further information on that topic. So there's a little wheel that is really clunky. And, some of the puzzles will be bend a lockpick a certain way so that it can unlock a thing, work out numbers. There's one near the end that you have to remember, like, the location of these lights on a board, and then it disappears and you have to click in the right bit or you fail. And so it's those kind of annoying puzzles. Some of them are okay, but a lot of the time it's those kind of old school, really frustrating-y puzzles. But some of them, you know, they're not too bad, but they're not modern. They're not going to have you jumping for joy. A large reason that I continue to play this game was, one, because I want the backstory for the context of the games that come after, which is quite crucial. And two, the story in the game itself is interesting. You can tell it's Frogwares. It's made by the Ukrainian team back in the day, 13 years ago, 14, 15, however long it was in development. And it's still got that kind of AA focus interactive jankiness from back then, before it had a huge budget. But it's quite stylish. It's definitely improvement over the games that came before. And it's you can see this is where they have started to push Sherlock Holmes into the modern Sherlock Holmes, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that's how the game largely plays out. There's a very big plot twist in this one that you need to know for future games like The Devil's Daughter and Chapter 1 and everything, because you just do. This is kind of a linchpin game that needs to be played, despite the jank. Now, let's talk about playing order. As far as I know, the order they came out is Testament of Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishment a couple years later. Then The Devil's Daughter, then Chapter 1, then The Awakened, or whatever it's called. But they are out of chronological order, because Crimes and Punishment, I think, comes before The Testament, and then it's Devil's Daughter, which comes after Testament. I'm playing in release order, and I think that's probably the best thing you should do as well. But I think The Testament of Sherlock Holmes is most definitely worth playing still. Just for the sheer fact of the story. It does have dated puzzles, as I mentioned, but the graphics are good in this version, and it really does set you up for future games. Now, I'll briefly touch on, I am now playing Crimes and Punishment, which will be the next review. It's pretty... The reason that you should play in release order is because after The Testament of Sherlock Holmes, the playstyle changes vastly into a more investigation-based... Like, when you go to Crimes and Punishment, it is way, 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 way better. It allows you to investigate certain clues and then use the kind of deductions from that to then talk to people and piece everything together yourself. And there's no right or wrong. That is the biggest difference. When you go back to The Testament of Sherlock Holmes, you can only get it right. Like, the game will not progress unless you get a puzzle or a kind of deduction correct. So there's no way to fail, which is perfectly fine. But Crimes and Punishment feels much more like a kind of open world game, even though it has a very similar fast travel to where you just click the map and you go to a new place. It's not open world in that sense, but it feels very much more like, here you go, here's a few different scenes for this case, work out who murdered this guy. Testament of Sherlock Holmes feels more like there's been a murder, but it's all connected to this bigger, grander conspiracy. So they're much different like that, but is Sherlock Holmes, The Testament of Sherlock Holmes, worth playing in now? I would say definitely, with the addendum that you are playing because you like story, you expect there to be puzzles in the old school adventure game style, and you're going to progress forward and you haven't played those games. Because if you are coming from, say, Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 or something, and you're coming back to it, unless you're a real Sherlock Holmes fan, you're probably not going to enjoy it, because The Testament of Sherlock Holmes is a puzzle game, and everything that come after is more of an adventure, action-adventure type investigation game. The game is around 7 to 8 hours long. There are some really good, interesting story points, as I said. There's a lot of villains that show up. There's a lot of intrigue. It is very, very gripping. There's some stuff with Sherlock that's very mysterious. You swap between him and Watson. And it does kind of compel you through the game to find out just what on earth is happening in this grander sense of, like, why is this evil villain doing this and how is that connected to this? And it does a really good job. So if you can get past the niggles of really annoying puzzles, like, I wouldn't play this game for the puzzles unless you really love puzzles. This is more, hey, I'm gonna play it because it's Sherlock Holmes and I want to see what happens. So those are my thoughts on the Testament of Sherlock Holmes. As I said, I will be progressing on and reviewing Crimes and Punishment next. I'm already playing it. So let me know if you've played the Testament of Sherlock Holmes recently. I saw another content creator say they replay them every year. So I'm assuming this has a pretty big fan base. I mean, I've not really had a lot to do with the Sherlock Holmes games. So, I mean, let me know your thoughts below. You know, if you've played them all, which one is your favorite? Because I'm really interested. I've heard they go up and down in quality. With a lot of people love Crimes and Punishment, as I say, it's the best one. So I'm interested to know what I can expect. Subscribe if you like this and you want to find out, you know, follow me through my Sherlock Holmes journey. And I'll see you in the next video.